This is episode 39 on the Live Blissed Out podcast. Bank codes are an easy-to-use personality assessment to determine customer values and what core ideals shape their worldviews. Did you know that the Woodworth's personal data sheet was a personality test developed to detect soldiers who were emotionally unfit for combat in World War I? Hello, action takers. Welcome to Live Blissed Out, a podcast where I have authentic conversations with business owners and subject matter experts to help us get the scoop, the 411, and the lowdown on a variety of topics. Tired of hesitating or making decisions without having the big picture? Want to be in the know? Then this is the place to go. I'm your host, Marissa Houston, helping achieve bliss through awareness and action. Thanks for joining me. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice. Sending a coffee mugshot shout out to Suzanne M. in Hudson, Colorado. Thanks for filling my coffee cup, Suzanne, and being such a cool bean. If you'd like to keep me fueled, head over to liveblissed.com and click on the Caffeinate Me tab to give me a boost and redeem your bonus as a thank you for supporting the show. My guest is Dr. Eric Goodman, founder of Meridian Success Group. He earned a PhD in business administration with a focus in organization development, a master's degree in business administration, and a bachelor's degree in marketing from the University of Colorado at Boulder. Meridian Success Group believes the pathway to extraordinary and sustainable growth begins from within. His reason for being is rooted in serving as a catalyst for positive growth and transformation in the lives he touches, and he has helped thousands of individuals and dozens of organizations discover, leverage, and maximize their potential. He is a certified and licensed coach and trainer of Bank Code and is excited to share his knowledge that you will be able to turn into action and impressive results. Get your complimentary personality report at bp.crackmycode.com/communicate. To learn more, visit meridiansuccessgroup.com. This episode is sponsored by Audible, where you can find audiobooks and exclusive Audible originals. Just head over to my personal link at audibletrial.com/liveblissed to receive your 30-day free trial, a free audiobook of your choice, and a commitment-free guarantee. Check out Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. You can also click on the link in the show notes to let Audible know I sent you and help support the show. Thanks to Audible for sponsoring this episode and allowing me to share this great offer with our listeners. Hi, Eric. It's so great to have you here today.
Well, I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to visit with you, Marissa.
I am looking forward to having this dialogue with you today because given the circumstances that everyone's dealing with, particularly in business, people are challenged right now. They're having concerns about the direction that their business is taking. They are used to doing business a certain way, and now things have changed and they're primarily having to take it virtually, and they have never had to do that before. We are living in circumstances that we never expected. It's totally changed everything. And now we're having to reassess where things are going. And so that being said, I think it's important to have the conversation about what are some things that small business owners can do right now? What are some strategies that they can incorporate to survive in the current situation that we're in?
Yeah, that's a really great question because we are, as you pointed out, these are sort of uncharted waters and unprecedented times. And when you look at small businesses, there was a study done in the last month by Goldman Sachs and a survey of small businesses where they anticipated that the majority would not last beyond the next 3 months because their sales have plummeted. And with the layoffs, as we've seen, we have unemployment claims. Really, when you look at the rate of that, that's unprecedented. You have to go back to the early 80s with the Reagan era. So from a perspective of survival, and I'll come back to this issue around sales plummeting and the limitations for being in a virtual environment for many businesses as they've had to close their doors. As businesses look to figure out sort of how do they scale down, and in some cases, how do they temporarily close because of the nature of their business, if they're essential or non. And then also, how do they transition to maybe different models and thinking out of the box in terms of what they offer by way of products or services that can bring in some revenue? Because obviously, for any small business, your daily cash flow is really your lifeblood. And fortunately, there's some relief too in terms of, what is available. Fortunately, with some of the authorization of disaster loans for small businesses and things of that nature that have passed, there's an opportunity for people to apply for small business administration loans and disaster loans, and then also to explore even private sector programs. And sometimes there's other types of grants that are available. And at a minimum, an opportunity for businesses to look at some of their existing contracts and agreements that they may have so that they can minimize the amount of debt they have. And in some cases, it can even be, if you've got a physical facility or a business, talking with your landlords and working out arrangements in terms of your rent, for example. And then also with banks deferring interest payments on outstanding debt, things of that nature can really make a difference. A lot of strategies when it comes down to how do you survive, and not only how do you survive, but how do you thrive? Because in cases like this, and you can think about it going back to the economic recessions we've had over the years, there's always somebody that can make lemonade out of lemons. And when you look at the environment, a lot of people are in a place of fear right now. And rightfully so in terms of their experience. But it really comes down to your mindset. And if you understand some things, you can take advantage of this window of opportunity, because a crisis is really a terrible thing to waste. And it's an opportunity for people to really step back and work on their businesses. And that's something with Meridian Success Group. When I work with business owners, oftentimes people are so immersed in the day-to-day, they never have a chance to stop working in the business and step out of their business and really work on their business so they can optimize it with proven business strategies that maximize their people, their productivity, and their profitability in a way that will benefit them. And so you see sort of two people. I was on a meetup call recently and they were asking, what are you binge watching? And I'm like, I don't have time to binge watch. I am busier than I've ever been helping businesses. And it was almost like people were bragging about, I watched this and I watched that. And ultimately, you have a certain amount of time in every day. And that was true before this. It's always going to be true. But it's really where you spend the time and what you do with the time that's going to make or break your business success. So I do see people, and particularly the clients that I'm working with, that recognize that this is an opportunity. And someone said fear stands for those false expectation appearing real. Other people are like, well, forget everything and run, the FEAR. But it's really the acronym that I love is face everything and rise. It's an opportunity to look and understand your circumstance. Viktor Frankl, if you ever read Man's Search for Meaning, he was a Holocaust survivor. And he talked about the environment. And even in the worst of circumstances, you always have an opportunity to choose your mind. And that was really sort of the last of the human freedoms, is that you have control over your attitude. So for people that are looking for a boost in morale or hope or mindset and want to learn a skill set or a tool set that can really catapult their business, there's no time like the present to maximize what you're doing in your own personal and professional development to take your business to the next level. And I think it goes back to some basics as well, because a lot of times people in business, and this is one of the things I find in working with business owners, and I come from it from a sort of unique background because I was in the corporate world working for a billion-dollar organization as a manager, and ultimately went back and got my master's degree in business while I was there and understood that there's things that I didn't know. And what I found is that it was what I didn't know that got me into trouble. And that's true with most business owners. And ultimately, I ended up so fascinated by best practices and their strategies. And I don't need to reinvent the wheel, whether I'm working for this company or doing other things. Ultimately, I went back and got my PhD in business administration, University of Colorado Boulder, and actually changed gears and went into becoming a teacher, a professor, and then spent over a decade as a business school dean and chief academic officer, and spent a lot of years working with companies and individuals to really maximize their performance. But the thing that always struck me, more so than anything, was when I worked with executives and particularly solopreneurs, they often felt sort of embarrassed that they didn't know something and that it wasn't okay to ask a question. And so from the consulting work that I've been doing the last several years, and really for decades, working with businesses, it's understanding that there are new levels of awareness and possibilities and better options for how you do things if you're willing to take the time to step back and learn something new, because that's what holds most people back in business and in life. They significantly overestimate the amount they know versus what they know they don't know.
Yes, and we are lifelong learners, aren't we? I mean, the bottom line is there's a difference between learning something on a book and actually putting it into practice, and what applies to one may not apply to the other. So always being open to trying new things, experimenting, learning, and looking at things from a different perspective as well is very beneficial for all of us, don't you think?
Yeah, it really is. And sometimes you find tools that really help give you a different perspective on things. And I'll give you an example of that because I've spent a lot of years looking at finding all the tools that work and the best practice strategies, and even having taught strategic planning, for example, to undergrads to doctoral students in a past life and working with executives and companies. There's structures and processes and systems that work. And sometimes you've got to get a different perspective. And sometimes it's through, like you said, it's learning new things, but information by itself isn't worthy unless you actually have the application. Knowledge is potential power, and it's being able to apply that in a way that's meaningful. In my quest to find things that are going to make a difference for a business or for somebody in terms of their success, one of the things that always struck me, they always said we need students that could be better in terms of their interpersonal skills. And by that, I mean things like their communication, their leadership, their ability to work in teams. It's sort of the soft skills that were always a critical aspect. And the reality is we know that it's not your IQ that makes a difference in your success in life. It's really your EQ or your emotional intelligence. And that is really what's important at the end of the day. It contributes so much not only to your business success. There's a lot of different studies that have validated that 90% of what you do and your ability to move up the corporate ladder is dependent on that. And then it translates into your health, into your wellness, into your family, and a lot of other aspects of your life as well. But I actually had used a lot of personality systems. And I think that's relevant to this idea of perception, because we all have a perception of ourselves, and then other people have a perception of us, and sometimes they don't align. And it's the same with our business. Like, what is your brand as a business? And who is your ideal client? Who are you actually serving? And who's your sort of term as a customer avatar that you want to serve in the marketplace? And so when you start talking about perception, and we would use a lot of different personality systems, use dozens of them over the years. And sometimes they were with companies I was consulting with. Other times they were embedded in MBA programs where our students were taking them. And what I found was they were great because they helped you get a better perspective of yourself and how you view yourself, really sort of intrapersonal, and increase your self-awareness. And part of your emotional intelligence is not just increasing your self-awareness, but it's being able to manage yourself and your own emotions. That's the intrapersonal side. But that part of it that a lot of those systems didn't address is what I heard criticism about from employers is the soft skills, like getting people to work together, to manage conflict, to lead each other, to work productively in teams, to communicate effectively. It's the interpersonal. So most of the personality systems in terms of your perception, they help you understand that and validate with others, their view and how you're viewed. But they didn't help you in any regard really in an easy way to figure out other people, and more importantly, how to enhance your communication. So interestingly enough, I had a former campus president that asked me if I had ever heard of this personality system called BANK. And I was like, no, I've never heard of it. What is it? And she started explaining that it was a reverse engineered personality system designed to break buying behavior in less than 90 seconds. And you can imagine my interest was piqued. And I should also share one of the colleges of business that I led was the largest business college probably in the U.S. So I had over 22,000 students just in my college of business. And it was a competency-based model. And we actually had a major in sales, which there's only a couple dozen universities across the U.S. that actually have a major in sales. A lot of them have majors in marketing, and you're taking some sales courses. So I got really familiar with these different personality tools there, but more importantly, sales training programs that we actually embedded because we wanted our students to get certified in it. So when I heard this thing about personality systems that were designed to predict buying behavior, I'm like, whoa, that's really an interesting concept, because I think we assume that from a perceptual perspective, everybody is the same as us.
We understand that as human beings, we have a lot in common. So when we talk about the question, why do people buy? Well, we think about the generic answer, which is they buy because they need something, or they buy because they're interested in the item. But we don't really dig deeper than that. And when you told me about Bank and I read the book, Why They Buy, it really hit home. My interest was piqued because I thought, wow, this is a different concept. It really addresses the person individually in terms of what they prioritize in terms of their thought process and what matters to them, and then presenting the product or service in a way that makes sense to them individually, not generic like we're used to doing all the time.
Yeah, that's what's really powerful. And when you think about it, and this is not a revolutionary concept in terms of people are different. And this idea of personality goes back 2,500 years to the father of medicine, Hippocrates, who said, I think we can categorize the human race into these 4 temperaments. But if you think about that, and we all agree people are different, do you think, to your point, they make buying decisions differently? Why they buy might be different for one person based on their personality to another. And unfortunately, when you look at most marketing and most approaches to sales, it's how do you sell? And it doesn't ask the question, well, why do people buy? So even the training programs that I was involved with in sales at the university, when we studied that, it was a myth. The mindset is you got to get more no's to get
yeses.
A yes, right? And so it's really a myth, because the reality is, we buy from people we know, like, and trust. And at the end of the day, you've probably heard, or a lot of people have been coached maybe to build rapport with clients and mirror them and do things like that. But this is the most simple system that I've ever seen in terms of helping somebody understand personality, taking rapport building to a whole nother level. And more importantly, it helps you understand and adapt quickly to a variety of people, that then you can basically understand what are their motivations to not only buying, but in terms of what they value from a relationship perspective, so you can connect with them. And when you start thinking about this overlay of personality with buying behavior, there's an interesting study done by the Chally Group years ago that summed it up in that only 18% of buyers will buy from a salesperson who doesn't match the buyer's personality type, versus 82% when your personality types are aligned. So you can imagine what that can do for your business. And I've actually worked with companies where when I started applying this particular system, I saw exactly that, where we had businesses that had conversion rates in the low double digits, 15, 20%, where we were able to, once we implemented this, increase their conversion rates up to 70, 80%, because they understood now how do they match and how do they serve broader people and really create a sticky experience for the people that they're interacting with. So then they were able to stand out from other businesses.
Yes, it's like speaking the same language. We don't sell different products necessarily. And oftentimes we have a service or a product that many other people can offer. So the question really becomes, why buy from you? What makes you different? And why would they want to do business with you? Going back to the know, like, and trust. And again, it boils down to speaking the same language. And it even applies to presentation. So for example, we always talk about learning style, but we've never really addressed personality style. Like, how do people think? And what matters to them and what helps them open their minds and hearts to the conversation. And so I think this concept, as you said, it's not new, but it's different in terms of how we look at applying it in circumstances where we're offering a product or service to our clients and helping them connect with us in a way that they haven't before.
Sometimes it's a hard lesson to learn because, when you're meeting with people, whether they're prospective clients or somebody that you're working to build a relationship with, it can be costly if you get that no. And you're not really understanding, how do I connect with them in a way that I can speak their same language and really help them and also serve them in a way that's going to help empower them as well. And I think back to one of my early lessons when I was a manager. I had an employee that I recognized publicly at an awards banquet, and he was upset by it. he came up to me afterwards and he's like, I can't believe you did that. You had me go up on the stage and everything else. And it never crossed my mind because that was something that I thought would be great. Like, who wouldn't want that?
Boy, and I can relate to that because I'm the same way. It is not anything that gets me excited. I don't want to be recognized in public like that. So I can totally understand where he was coming from because it's such a common thing that we do. We think everybody else enjoys it, but there are people who actually don't.
Yeah. And so with this tool, what they've really created is a whole system. Imagine if you had a crystal ball that could drop from the ceiling that would tell you exactly what it is you need to say to that other person to better serve them, to connect authentically and genuinely with them. And in some cases, whether it's enhancing an existing relationship or building a new relationship, or if it's regarding serving them through a sale or having them come on board for your services, if you had that, how valuable would that be?
Since we have all these different personalities, what exactly is Bank and how does that apply? Let's say that you were doing a presentation to a group of people, or let's say that you have a new client that reached out or potential prospect that reached out and said, I'm interested in your product. How do you know where to start? How do you know how to identify their personality and apply it in an effective way?
Well, that's a great question, Marissa. And so in terms of where to start, so first of all, Bank is an acronym. It's BANK, not that you're a financial bank, but it really is a financial bank once you learn it, because it'll be something that you know for life that has rewards you'll reap not only personally, but professionally and financially. But it's an acronym for 4 personality types: B for blueprint, A for action, N for nurturing, and K for knowledge. And what's unique about it too is it is a values-based system. And you probably know that people typically buy based on their emotions and they justify things based on logic. They like to think they're making a rational decision, but they often aren't. So Bank is a powerful communications concept that really allows you to understand, again, how people make decisions. And that extends to buying decisions. It extends to decisions they make about what motivates them. But once you understand that, in effect, through the training and some of the tools, you learn how do I custom tailor and personalize what it is I'm sharing with this particular individual about my product or service in a way that's going to connect and resonate with them, so they, rather than getting a no, I'm getting a yes. You use that term, speaking the same language. I think it's a great analogy because you think about it. For both English speakers, which we're having this conversation in English right now, we understand each other. But imagine if I'm speaking English and you don't understand any English. Maybe your native language is French. We're not going to connect. Or maybe it's Italian, and maybe it's German or Portuguese, whatever it is. Each of these personality types is the equivalent, really, of speaking an entirely different language. And I'm reminded of the Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, the John Gray book from years ago. It's really that concept. And so with the tools, we've got some really basic, even just cards that you can give to somebody else. And rather than guessing somebody's personality, why not have them share it with you very quickly? Again, this idea in less than 90 seconds, you can get this information. But also through the training, you don't even have to do that. You can learn to recognize things about a person just by how they look and how they're dressed, and based on, maybe some conversation you're having very quickly, what their personality type is, how do you adjust that? But more importantly, they've taken the concept to an entirely higher level with tools that are online, that are digital, that allow people to get the benefit of getting basically a free personality report, something of value to them so they can understand themselves as sort of a lead magnet, if you will. But then on the flip side, you're getting information about their personality, and you can utilize that to better serve them more quickly in a way that's genuine and authentic with that type of report, and really a CRM system that underlies it. And what's really exciting is we are launching the world's first artificial intelligence system that's powered by this Bank methodology. So imagine now you can go to anything that is digital, any electronic footprint, whether it's a LinkedIn page, a website, an email, a piece of marketing collateral, whatever it is, anything that is text-based, and push a button and it'll tell you what is the underlying code. And you may be familiar with IBM Watson. Neil Sahota, one of the creators of that system, 27 patents, is actually on the advisory board of the company called Codebreaker Technologies that pioneered this Bank methodology and has helped design this game-changing, really industry-disruptive system that, when you think about most personality systems too, wouldn't be feasible feasible to have somebody do that because they're spending half an hour, answering a ton of questions. With this, it takes a minute. And even in some cases with the artificial intelligence tool, nanoseconds to be able to determine that, plus the training that you could do and also determine it on your own very quickly. What's even more exciting about it is most of those types of reports, when you're doing that, there's a cost per report that is significant. And it can range from the low end from probably $10 to $15 up to $250 for some of these personality reports. And what they've done is created a package where you are getting the equivalent of the ability to give everybody who you want a digital personality report, as well as having the use of the artificial intelligence tool. And it doesn't take a rocket science to figure out, like, okay, based on my business, if I could increase my conversion rate, or if I had one more sale I was closing, or one more no that I turned into yes, does that make sense?
It's all relative, right? If it pays for itself and then some?
Absolutely. And, I was actually talking with a colleague of mine who's been using this system in real estate. And I've seen it obviously in a lot of different industries where people have 3x the revenue. But this is a realtor who was basically free utilizing this system, was still making a significant amount of money, well over $100,000, but she's more than tripled her annual income. And she credits bank for her ability to connect with more clients, and also not only just the prospective buyers, but even the realtors that she's working with and negotiating. And you think about that, how powerful is that? And I've been using some pilots and using this with, things related to hiring. And that's always a challenge, finding the right people and making sure they're part of your organization as you grow and scale, and making sure they're in the right role as well. So there's all sorts of implications for this in terms of not only growing your sales and revenue, but how you can position yourself, building trust, increasing engagement, dealing with diversity and inclusion, and enhancing teamwork within an organization, reducing conflict, so that you can ultimately achieve a sustainable competitive advantage.
And the cool thing is it even applies on a personal level, even at home, with friends, with any relationships that you have. When you understand the person's language, you're able to really reach out to them in a way that you haven't before. What is a great way to get started? Like for me, you introduced me to the book and I couldn't put it down. It spoke to me. I was able to understand very clearly what Bank stood for and the different personalities. Now, for our listeners, let's say they want to start learning about it or get more information, where do they go?
The first thing that they can do is visit my website or my Facebook page, Meridian Success Group. I have information on both about the bank system, but I would invite your listeners, and actually I think it's a nice gift to your listeners as well, so they can get a little greater self-awareness. I'll give you a link, and again, you may need to write it down. It's a URL.
I will put it in the show notes as well, so they can access it that way in case they forget.
The system where we have the ability to give people a report is called Bank Pass. And so if you simply go to the https://bp as in bankpass.crackmycode.com/communicate, you'll be able to get a free report. And I do webinars and other events. I'm on the board of directors for the local Chamber of Commerce. So I'm always looking for opportunities as well. If people happen to have a community of learners or people that are really looking for a game-changing tool that will skyrocket their ability to be successful with their business, welcome the opportunity to come in and share more about it. But as a starting point, they can do that. They can also reach out, email me, eric@meridiansuccessgroup.com. I'll also go ahead and give your listeners a phone number they can call to be able to connect directly with me, 303-335-5800. And your point earlier, too, I want to come back to about relationships outside of business and in personal life, because what's been interesting is even though this was developed for sales, what started happening was people were like, I learned this and then I recognized like my husband was like this type, or my wife is this type, or my kids, are this type. And, as a parent, and I've got 2 teenage daughters and they're amazing. And I thought I understood them. At the same time, understanding bank gave me a totally different view. It goes back to that perspective, right, that you were talking about before. It's like, I didn't know what I didn't know. And once I realized that, then I was able to take our relationships to a whole nother level. Because I think as parents, sometimes we parent the child we wish we had, not the child we had. I can share an example at a training. There was a mother there, and it was actually one where it was sort of family oriented because it was for an organization that was looking at the parenting skills. And there was a mother there and having the conversation with the son son, a 12-year-old, a boy, and talking about like, what does he love doing? And he's like, was sort of hesitant. He's like, well, I play football. I am involved with lacrosse. I run track. Started rattling all these things off, but it wasn't the answer to the question about what do you love doing? And sort of asked for permission from him. And the mother, like, okay, this workshop is all about communication and enhancing relationships. So do you give your son permission to really be candid about his experience here? Because you could tell that he wasn't really excited about that. And so he asked the question, like, what is it about football that you enjoy? He's like, well, I really don't. So why are you doing it? He's like, well, my mom and dad want me to. You could see the mother literally start tearing up in the background because she knew that it was the pressure. And it goes back to personality. She was what was considered an action personality that thrives on winning, and her husband was as well. They want excitement and opportunity. They love going to sporting events. They bought their son, the basketball hoop and all those things. And their son was a knowledge type, which is somebody who loves learning and values sort of technology and things like that. And when you ask the son, well, what would you really like to be doing? He's like, well, I love to read. I like playing video games. I really don't like going outside and, having to go play these sports. So it's just one example of parenting the child you wish you had versus the child you had.
And it's looking at it from somebody else's lens. We look at things from one perspective and we can't understand the other. One of the things that excited me about this was the conversations that I have with my guests. And the reason for this podcast is to help people become more aware, to allow us to see things in a way that we normally wouldn't. And given the fact that we are in a situation where we're looking for new opportunities now, looking to think outside the box and take our business to a different direction because we have to do things a little differently now. And this is another tool to give us that and perhaps help get our businesses moving in the right direction.
I'm so glad that you recognize it. And it's the brilliance and the simplicity and the ease of application that led Forbes in this past year to refer to this new AI system as the future of sales. So it's something you're going to be hearing more about. It's gone viral. It's now in over 180 countries. And also going back to that idea of language, even with that URL I gave you, you'll note that you can actually view the cards in 30 some different languages because of that fact, because it is such a powerful tool. And what's really exciting is this is something that's been presented at the United Nations, because the mission of the organization is really to create one world, one language. You think about it, we're on a planet with 7 billion people, 6,500 languages that are spoken. However, this is a system that can actually unify the human race. And think about the implications for world peace and harmony and resolving conflict. And it takes what Hippocrates, the father of medicine, said, well, if I understand somebody's temperament and treat them differently based on that, I'll get better outcomes. And, when you think about fast forwarding to medicine today and personalized medicine, and the fact that we have DNA now, that we understand how to do that, this is really the equivalent of that.
It's another tool that will give us the opportunity to learn about what the other person values, not necessarily what you value. And oftentimes too, let's not forget that we don't know ourselves as well as we think. And so by taking this personality test, you might be pleasantly surprised, or maybe not. Maybe it's exactly what you thought it was going to be, but it's nice to validate what you thought you are, or maybe what you thought you were not, and be able to apply that. It boils down to understanding, because if we know, then we're more empowered to go ahead and take action. No matter how much we know, if we're not going out there and doing something with it, then it will not serve us the way we hope it will. So I am so truly grateful for having you here and explaining this all to us. I wanted to also remind people that the book is called Why They Buy by Cheri Tree. That's Cheri Tree. And it is a great starting point as well to really understand the concept of bank and what it's about. And then also visit your website in order to get that free assessment and learn more about your individual personality type.
Yes. Thank you, Marissa. Really appreciate that. And with the book too, there is a digital version. And so you can get information about that through me if you'd like as well. But it's one of those books. I'm so glad to hear that you couldn't put it down. And I had that same experience, because it is something that it's so simple and yet powerful and profound in terms of the impact it can have. So it's really a treat to share this information and this system with your listeners. And if I can be of service, again, the one thing I always enjoy is when I'm working with a business owner entrepreneur or an individual to help them improve and take their life or their business to the next level is to think about how big they would dream if they knew they couldn't fail. And when you start finding tools that can make a huge difference in your life, personally and professionally, it's well worth the investment in time. And you can choose, do you want to binge watch?
Yeah.
Or do you want to actually take action and make something happen with the information that's out there? So if I can be of service or support to anybody, any of your listeners, I would welcome that opportunity. And thank you again for the chance to visit with you.
Thank you so much, Eric. I appreciate it.
Likewise.
That's all for this episode of Live Blissed Out. Thanks for listening, and thanks to Dr. Eric Goodman for being my guest. If you find value in our show, please visit liveblисsedout.com to reach out, subscribe, and share on social media. This show is made possible through listeners like you. Thank you. So long for now, and remember to keep moving forward.